startups are very different from a large organization. And so someone that has only worked in a large organization and has a great idea, oh my goodness, that's very difficult for them to understand what a startup is going to look like and how will you have to run a lean and mean organization instead of going in and say, okay, I'm going to go in, I used to work at some large company and, I had 20 people reporting to me and they had 20 people reporting to them. And gee, I need a, 200 people or 300 people to get the product built. You look at it and you say, oh, that might work for a large company, but that's not what a startup is.
Hi, Pramod. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Hi there, Grace. My pleasure.
Yeah. So you are one of the most successful investor in the venture world. Can you tell us a little bit more about how did you get into venture, and tell us a little bit more about how did you grow up and what kind of things that impact you early on?
So let me give you a background. It's a sort of an interesting background. I grew up in India. I grew up in the city of Delhi, India. I have an interesting name. First name Pramod, last name Haque. First name Pramod is a Hindu name and last name Haque is a Muslim name. And so people would ask me, who are you? And what confounded it even further was that when I was 18 years old, I became a follower of Jesus. And I would tell them I'm a Christian. So they would look at me and say, that is amazing. Your first name is a Hindu name, your last name is a Muslim name, and you're a Christian name, and you're a Christian. And I would tell them, yes, I'm the United Nation of names. So anyway, I grew up, I went to college in Delhi, did my engineering degree. And after that, I went to work for 3 years for Siemens, which is a large medical or a German company. I worked in the medical division, did some sales engineering and sales. And then in 1972, I came to the US at Northwestern University in Evanston, Chicago, and I did my PhD in electrical engineering. And when I finished my PhD in electrical engineering, I got a job in Chicago, in Northbrook, Illinois, North Chicago, to work for a company called EMI Medical. EMI at that time was mostly known for being a music company because they were the ones that had promoted the Beatles. But they also had a small medical division that they had started. And this was the company that had invented the CT scanner. This is back in mid 1970s. And so I worked for them for about 4 years actually, 1976 to 1980, helping build the first whole body scanner in the US. And so it was very innovative, even though this was a large company, but this was a startup within a large company. And so I did that for 4 years. And while I was doing that, I also did my part-time MBA at Northwestern University in the evening. And then in 1980, I moved to Southern California to work for a startup. And the startup was also building CT scanners, but they wanted to build low-cost CT scanners using microprocessors because microprocessors was very new in those days. And the whole idea was, how do you make a CT scanner that smaller hospitals can afford to buy? And so I did that for about 3 years, sold the company, and then I got recruited to go to Minnesota, be CEO of a startup. So I joined another startup. And I did that for about 4 or 5 years, eventually sold the company to a larger company. And I began to do some consulting for some smaller companies because I loved startups. And I had spent a lot of time in startups. And as a result, I ended up running into Norwest Venture Partners and doing some consulting for them. And so I started consulting for them in 1989. And then they asked me to join them full time in November of 1990. That's 30 years ago. So that's how I got into the venture capital industry. Was an entrepreneur working in startups, did some work for them, consulting, and then they hired me full time.
What were something that you learned in each part of your journey? What are some skills that you've adapted early on in life that you find it's really useful later on?
My background is very interesting. When I first started out of college in India, my work was a sales engineer. My work was as a sales engineer and a salesperson. And I learned a lot of things about how to sell complicated equipment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Electronic equipment, because back in those days, it was simple planar x-rays,
Mm-hmm.
x-ray machines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned how customers ask questions, how an sales engineer is supposed to answer those questions, and then help them understand what the product does, and how do you also help them understand how are you different from competitors. And so I learned a lot of that. And then when I came to the US, again, like I said, I did my PhD, and then I went to work for a small division of a large company, EMI, and they had pioneered the CT scanner, full body CT scanner, whole body CT scanner, as they called it. And one of the things I learned in those days was, so we were the first company that built the whole body CT scanner. And so our initial clients were literally just two or three people, two or three entities, Mayo Clinic, and then we had a couple of other clients. I learned how it is so difficult for startups to sell a new product. What does it take to sell a new product, to convince large customers or even small customers to buy a new product that is not proven, no one else is using it, they are the early adopters? How do you work with early adopters? How do you get them to buy a product? How do you convince them that it makes sense for them to buy the product? What is the value proposition of your product? So those were very interesting lessons I learned. And then, as I said, I again went to work for a startup in Southern California, building a low-cost scanner, selling to smaller hospitals, right? And then I came back to Minneapolis, and this was the early days of 3D imaging. So I was doing 3D imaging systems. Again, a new product being sold to large hospitals, small hospitals. And so I learned a lot about not just engineering, but also sales and also marketing, and how do you present your value proposition. So, all those experiences, sales, engineering, marketing, customer service, all those were experiences that I had, jobs that I held, and that really helped me to understand, how does a startup really function? What are the challenges they face when they build a product, right? Whether it's talking to venture capitalists initially to raise money, because I had to raise money for my companies, two of those, and how do you present the value proposition? And then also, once you have a product built, how do you go present it to customers so that they will take the risk and buy it from an unknown company? So, those were all the experiences that I gained as I was building my career before I got into the venture capital world.
Like, in terms of selling, like, how did you acquire this skill? Assuming it's just sales, but like, how do you kind of what are some action that you take to build this particular toolkit?
See, in my situation, I was fortunate. I think God put me in different roles. So here I was in India selling equipment, right? So I was a salesperson being trained as a sales engineer and then as a salesperson. And then when I got my PhD at Northwestern, I was intensely driven into product engineering, right? Building a whole body scanner. And then in that process, also going to customers like Mayo Clinic and a couple of other large institutions at that time in San Francisco, in Ohio, trying to sell them this new scanner that we had developed, right? So those were skills, again, that I developed through practical training, right? Not just reading a book, but actually being involved in the day-to-day activities and seeing what customers really ask you. Now, what helped me was, as I pointed out, when I was doing after I did my PhD and when I was working at EMI Medical, I was also doing my MBA, right, part-time. And so therefore I was learning a lot of things. And so it was not just learning from a book, but also the experience that I had actually doing that stuff. And so all of those were very, very useful experiences that helped me understand, what does it take for startups to function, to succeed, and what are the challenges they face, and how do you address those challenges?
In terms of the startups, like the challenges that startup face, like what do you think would be the number one challenge?
Yeah, so I think you raised a very good question. And, these are sort of questions that we ask ourselves, and then we ask the entrepreneurs when we meet them, because as you can imagine, we get lots of presentations from lots of different entrepreneurs and so on. And so, the key thing is when we look at a company or a presentation that an entrepreneur is presenting to us, we're not just looking at the presentation, we're also trying to look at their background, right? What is their background? What have they done before? Do they have any experience in product management? Do they understand the market space? Do they understand what customers are really looking for? Do they really have a good understanding of what the competitive environment is? What is the problem that they're solving? And is this a large problem? Is this a huge problem that they're trying to solve? And no one else has solved this problem? Are you the only ones that are thinking of solving this problem? And what is the value proposition of your solution, right? And so these are all the things we look at. And then one of the other things that matters very much when we look at entrepreneurs and their presentations and then deciding whether to invest or not is trying to understand their background. Have they been involved in entrepreneurship before? Have they been involved in product development? Have they been involved in product engineering? Do they understand the market, or are they just dreaming about something? One or two things that we look for when we meet entrepreneurs is a couple of, there's a couple of things we look for. Sometimes, not all entrepreneurs will have all the relevant skills. So sometimes it's very important to look at co-founders. Here's a 2-person team or a 3-person team that have a vision. These are co-founders. And what we usually look for is the following. Okay, who in this group has, or who in this co-founder group, 2 or 3 people, who has product development background, right? Like they've developed products, engineering background, right? And then who in this group has product management background? In other words, these are people that have dealt with customers, have dealt with analysts, have dealt with salespeople, have dealt with product marketing people, messaging, and so on. But these are people that really understand what the market is, what the needs are, what the problems are in the markets, what are solutions therefore that will meet those market needs. So, usually then what we look for is a team, 1 or 2 founders, where one has a product engineering background and one has a product marketing background. And the combination of those 2 skills really now give them a much higher chance of success.
When you are looking at a team, if they never really had a lot of experience in the industry, would you still invest in them? Like, what's your thought on like the experience piece?
Okay, so that's a very good point that you raise, because sometimes when an entrepreneur might come to you with an idea, and as you look at their background, you'll find out that, well, okay, this person has a good product engineering background, but they have no product management background. Or it might be the reverse, where they have a good product management background. They understand the market need, the pain point, the problem that could be solved, but they have no engineering background, right? So usually what we have done is we try to find someone that would supplement them. So it's not uncommon for us sometimes to hear someone pitch a story to us, and then we say, I think what we need to do here is put you in touch with someone that has intense engineering background so they can build this product. So why don't now the 2 of you spend some time together? And sometimes it could be, a week or 2, and sometimes literally it's a month or 2 where they spend time with each other, getting to know each other and understanding each other's skill sets and product idea and vision and so on. So, those are skill sets we look for: product management and product engineering. And if they don't have those, then we also try to find someone that could, whatever is missing, we find someone that has that missing skill. And then I think the other thing we also look for, Grace, is the fact that it's important for us, the co-founders or the founder, have small company background experience. In other words, startups are very different from a large organization. And so someone that has only worked in a large organization and has a great idea, oh my goodness, that's very difficult for them to understand what a startup is going to look like. And how will you have to run a lean and mean organization instead of going in and say, okay, I'm going to go in, I used to work at some large company and, I had 20 people reporting to me and they had 20 people reporting to them. And I need a group, 200 people or 300 people to get the product built. You look at it and you say, that might work for a large company, but that's not what a startup is. Startup is lean and mean. And so, we look for entrepreneurs that have been through that experience themselves. and have been in a lean and mean organization and understand how to function in that organization.
One of the things I've heard about, like a lot of really popular accelerator, they're really looking for people who already work together for many, many years. Like what's your experience with that? Should the two co-founders already had like a lot of working experience together, or should they just have complementary skills that they will make something work?
Well, I think if there's two entrepreneurs that
Mhm.
have complementary skills, right? So one
Mhm.
is very intense in engineering, and the other is in product management, understands the market space, and so on.
Mhm.
And if they have worked together before, that is
Mhm.
great, right? That
Mhm.
is perfect. Now, if they haven't worked together,
Mhm.
then obviously we in our due diligence, in our reference checks, we have to make sure that personality wise they'll get along, and that they understand the value of collaboration, that
Mhm.
ego is not going to stand in the way. And then there are times when we might find an entrepreneur that comes to us who only has one of those skills, and we
Mhm.
might actually, out of our own network
Mhm.
of entrepreneurs that we know and
Mhm.
have gotten to know over the last 30 years in my case,
Mhm.
we will put them together, we'll pair them, right?
Mhm.
And again, we want to make sure that they understand that it's very important for them to work together.
Mhm.
Collaboration is extremely important, and we will meet with them on a regular basis, right? That's part of the
Mhm.
challenge of funding startups. Is it's not like you meet once a quarter for a board meeting. You got to
Mhm.
meet with them sometimes almost on a weekly basis, and sometimes literally 2 or 3 times a week in the initial
Mhm.
days when a company gets started. And that's
Mhm.
the value that we provide. How do you help entrepreneurs get to where they need to go to be able to
Mhm.
build a large company, or to build a nice company?
Like, what are some actions that you took to help these companies succeed? And when they first come to you, how do you first recognizing these are good companies? What does it look like to
So,
invest in them and
so
build
you
a
have to
good
spend
company?
you have to spend a fair time. They might give you a pitch, but then we're
Mhm.
meeting with them, we're having lunch with them, having breakfast with them, having a phone call with them, asking them
Mhm.
questions, researching the space. There are times when if they come up with a pretty interesting idea,
Mhm.
we want to validate that idea. So, we will call up in our network of
Mhm.
customers, of other entrepreneurs that we know that might not necessarily be competitive, but might know the space,
Mhm.
and ask them, hey, what do you think about this? You think there's a need for something like this? And so there's a lot of work, there's a lot of
Mhm.
interaction that goes on after an entrepreneur meets us and presents the idea, right?
Mhm.
And in that process, they learn a lot too. As we ask them questions, it helps them refine their pitch, helps them think through the issues even further. There's a lot of that work that goes on. It's collaborative.
Like, when it was early on in your career, how do you build a really effective network? Not just like a lot of people but also like go in depths of like these people will actually help you to identify a good company.
Well, I think it varies, right? So, obviously, Norwest Venture Partners, we've been in
Mhm.
business since 1961.
Mhm.
Therefore, you can just imagine, and like I said, I've been in the venture business since 1990, right? So
Mhm.
30 years, and the company, the firm existed prior to my coming there. So the firm
Mhm.
has this network. Each partner has their own network. Each associate that we hire, each vice president that we hire, that comes into the firm, brings their own network with them, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then entrepreneurs that we have funded have their own
Mhm.
networks, right? So it's not uncommon for us when we're looking at a new company that we will actually go to our existing companies that we have funded that are not necessarily competitive, but we'll ask them, hey, we're looking for someone that understands the space. Can you introduce me to someone? Because we create a collaborative culture with our entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are very happy to help us as well and say, hey, yeah, let me go talk to someone that I know at Oracle, or I know someone at Google, or I know
Mhm.
someone, wherever. And they will then put us in touch with other entrepreneurs or experts in the area. And as a result, we're able to establish our network and grow it, and learn from it and cultivate, and harvest it.
When it comes to first meeting the company, do you create your own thesis and then go after a specific area, or do you just screening up what coming out of your network? What's the process of you recognizing a good
Yeah,
company?
it's a combination of both, right?
Mhm.
So there's a certain element of what we would call thematic research that we do.
Mhm.
So, now being a larger firm, we have associates in our firm that focus on that, right?
Mhm.
What is going on in the data analytics space? What is going
Mhm.
on in this whole AI space, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in the cybersecurity space? And then even in those spaces, there are subsegments of those spaces. What's going on in the endpoint cybersecurity space, and so on and so forth. For example, today, right, there's a lot of work going on in the whole area of artificial intelligence and all kinds of data analytic platforms that are being created. And so we are cognizant of the trends in the industry. And so we are aware of what's going on. And so when companies show up in that particular space, we're very interested. And then usually, as you can imagine, a lot of our deal flow comes from our contacts, people that have already, they know us, we funded them before, or we funded a friend of someone, and they come to us, and they reach out to us, and we take a meeting or we do a phone call. And so it's a combination of thematic as well as entrepreneurs showing up with presentations.
What are some characteristics do you look for in the ideas that they come up with, or that doesn't matter?
No, it doesn't matter. Like I said, if it fits our at times we might actually listen to someone and learn something, and it happens a lot. At times someone comes up with, okay, I'm building a new platform for cybersecurity because existing platforms have the following weakness, and here I've got something that solves that problem. Obviously, we'll look at that. We've invested in a lot of cybersecurity companies over the years. And so we said, okay, let's spend some time understanding this. And so that's okay, right? It's a combination of both. There's no one set way of doing it. It's a combination of different techniques.
Can you walk us through, at what point, do you pick company A instead of company B?
Well, very seldom have we run into that, but occasionally, I'm sure, as I dug into it more, I would find situations where, there were two somewhat similar companies, different founders, obviously. And so a lot of other combinations come into, for example, depends also the stage of the company. There are times when someone is coming to us, a company comes to us, it's literally, seed stage, right? They have an idea, but they haven't done anything. And then we might have someone else that shows up, an entrepreneur, a couple of entrepreneurs, founders, and they're much further along. Right? Same sort of idea, but they're much further along. And so, obviously in that case, someone that's further along becomes a little bit more interesting than something that is just absolutely, hey, I have an idea, versus someone that spent already a year or 2 years doing it. So, as an investment firm, we are somewhat stage agnostic. We will do Series A deals, or we might even do a seed deal. Where we might do a convertible note, or sometimes we've actually even done a Series B or a Series C. And so it all depends. Usually, if you're early on in the development of a certain sector, seed deals make a lot of sense. But there are times when you get to a point where, there's a lot of companies already tackling that problem. Now, if someone else shows up with a seed deal, it's not very interesting. I'd rather, because they're too far behind. They're 2-3 years behind someone else. If they're 3 years behind, that's tough. It's going to be tough. So therefore, we're looking for early stage companies, but also innovators that are ahead of others, right? And this is where the risk comes in. Sometimes you take the risk. And then there are times when, you might see a company, I wish I had seen this in Series A or when they did the seed deal, but I didn't, or we didn't. And now they're raising a Series B. Hey, it's a great deal. Let's go take a look at it and let's do it. And so we've done, so we work across different stages: seed, Series A, Series B, Series C.
For sure. So in terms of building a really strong venture team, what kind of people do you look for to join your team? Are they supposed to be expert in particular category, or are they supposed to be a well-rounded person and they're good at everything?
Yeah. So I think that's a very good point. So when we hire people onto our team, whether it's well, certainly at the partner level, at the investment team level, if it's a principal or a partner or a general partner, we're looking for people on the venture side, people that have operating experience in certain sectors, right? So let's say we're talking about the enterprise. So we're looking for people that have expertise in the enterprise sector, that they have been either in a product management role or they've been in a product engineering role, right? Or maybe they've even been a CEO before in that sector, but now work for a large company and so on. And so, those are skill sets we're looking for. And then, we'll also look for, when it comes to associates and senior associates, we're looking for people that understand that domain, right? So, someone that might have worked in an investment banking environment, but they've been focused on telecommunications and media and the internet, right?
Mhm.
Well, in that case, they are of interest to us. Whereas if they haven't worked in any of those sectors, then they're of less interest to us in the enterprise sector. Because if they don't understand the enterprise sector, the B2B, then, it's a little bit of a challenge. Same thing on the, if we're looking for someone to do medical investments, we're looking for someone that has some experience in the medical space.
When it comes to building a successful team or like coming up with the investment strategy for the whole firm, do you have couple like area in mind? Why did you pick a certain area instead of the other?
I think one of the things that we also look at, from an investment perspective, when a company shows up, what will it take for this company to get to a point where they will have significant revenues and turn EBITDA positive, be profitable? The reason why we stayed away from clean tech was the following reason. I remember this because we debated about that in our firm. And my view on that was, having been different kinds of companies over my career, prior to even investing, building hardware companies, building, CT scanners. And then there was a time when, even when I was building these CT scanners, those were the early days of when we were starting to use silicon. And you look at it and you say, okay, now those are the early days. Silicon was expensive to make. It wasn't all that easy. You look at this whole sector and you say, software is one thing, right? These days, everything is software driven. Software has become so easy now, especially with Amazon Web Services and even, what Azure is offering, Microsoft, and even what Google is offering with their Google Cloud. There's a lot of work that you can do and innovation and product building you can do without even having to own a whole bunch of hardware. Before the cloud, you had to own a whole bunch of hardware, right? Servers and so on and so forth. One of the reasons why we stayed away from clean tech was we basically said to build all this stuff will require a lot of manufacturing resources. And that means a lot of capital equipment. It'll drive you nuts. That will take a lot of capital. We just don't think it is fit for the venture environment. And we were right, and a lot of large venture firms were wrong. There's a lot of large venture firms that put so much money into clean tech and then eventually lost all that money. So therefore, when we look at things, we're also looking at, hey, this is a great idea. This is a great company. We could build a large company, but you also look at what will it take to get to profitable? And if so, does it make sense to fund a company where you think is going to take $300 million, $400 million to get to profitability? That's tougher than when you see a company and you can look at it and say, with all the web services available and so on and so forth, hey, we think we could build something, with about $50 to $100 million over the lifetime. And that's a much more attractive investment than something that's going to take $300-400 million.
Right now, is there any category you feel like could not be a good investment or not really interesting for you to look at?
No, not really, because I think the world has changed. Everything, as you know, has become very digital centric with the availability of all these web services, Amazon and Azure, Microsoft and Google and even IBM and so on. There's a lot of work that's going on that requires very minimal hardware, hardly anything, right? You can do everything now so easily. And so it makes it a lot easier. Now, are there sectors, we've stayed away from clean tech and we continue to stay away from clean tech. Hardware is slowly coming back, because for a period of time over the last 10 years or so, hardware investments had just dropped dramatically, right? No one is investing in hardware anymore. Now, I think over the next 10 years or so, we might see some resurgence in those areas, but time will tell, right? Everything that's silicon now is manufactured outside the US, in Hong Kong and Taiwan and China and other places. There are sectors that we stay away from. They're less exciting. But, the whole software sector, and now with AI coming in and data analytics coming in, it's just amazing what you can do in all different sectors, and verticals with this kind of software. And so, it's very interesting.
How do you quickly study an industry? Like, what are some actions that you take to become an expert in short
So what we've done is, that's a very good question, because as you can imagine, everything has gotten very specialized, right? And specialized investments required specialized knowledge and skills. And so what we've done in our firm is we've created different teams.
Mhm.
And we have different sectors. We have the enterprise sectors, B2B.
Mhm.
Right? Then we have a consumer internet sector. These are companies that are, selling to consumers, right?
Mhm.
And then we have a medical group, right? A medical sector. And so we literally have different teams working in these
Mhm.
areas. The medical team is not going to go out, and someone on the medical team is not
Mhm.
going to look at a software company that's going to be doing artificial intelligence and selling in the financial services space. Doesn't make any sense, right?
Mhm.
And so now they might have some contacts and they might get deal flow, but then they will turn it over to the right team and say, hey, this
Mhm.
falls in your bailiwick. You should sort of really look at this thing. And so that's what we've done. We've created specialized teams. So therefore, they spend all their time in that sector, and they can become experts in that sector rather than spreading themselves so thin that it's very difficult for them to keep track of all the developments that are going on in a given sector. Because
For
all this
sure.
takes time, right? There's so much
Mhm.
innovation going on. There's so much product development going on. There's so much going on in technology that it takes a lot of hard work and studying to keep in track, to keep abreast of all that. And so specialized teams are required for the specialized sectors. It wasn't so 20, 30
Mhm.
years ago when I first joined the industry, right? The venture industry. It was very different then. But right now, everything is getting very specialized, and everything is therefore very focused and concentrated.
Curious on like when you're selecting the expert in the industry or expert to joining your team, what are some criteria that you select from?
Like I pointed out, we're looking for people that have the right expertise, right? So if
Mhm.
we're looking, talking about the enterprise space, which is where I spend about 80% of my time, we're looking for people that have been in that space, that have worked in companies in that
Mhm.
space, that have had operating experience. And
Mhm.
so they might have been in a smaller company, or they might also have been in a larger company, and they've had different roles, right? They might have
Mhm.
done engineering, they might have done product management. Those are the two key skills we look for. Very seldom would we, for example, and this got nothing against salespeople, but someone that's a salesperson, doesn't have the skill sets that are required to be in a startup,
Mhm.
understanding what product development will take place, what product management issues are going to be, and how do you minimize expenses and still build a product. So we're looking for people that have the right kinds of skill sets and so on. Now, obviously, at the associate level, it's a little different. We're looking for people that have broad skills, and their job is to do a lot of research
Mhm.
and understand investing, and help with due diligence, but also when it comes to deal sourcing, keeping track of what are the trends in the marketplace and what's going on, and do a lot of thematic work on it, understand thesis and so on, and develop
Mhm.
strategy, help us develop strategy interactively in certain sectors and so on. So
Mhm.
it varies depending on the position that we're trying to fill.
Is there anything that you heard in venture capital that like people believe is the truth, but it's not really the truth?
Not really. No, I think the issue really becomes, like I pointed out, goes back, 10
Mhm.
years ago when clean tech was something that a lot of people were getting excited about, and making all kinds of claims about clean
Mhm.
clean tech. A lot of us in our group basically disagreed and said, no, we don't care who this person is, but this is something that I don't think makes sense from an investment perspective. Let's stay out of this place. And we did. And so those are the kinds of questions, we ask. And then, I think so, those are things where we would say, look, doesn't matter who this group is,
Mhm.
they're getting too excited about this. I just don't think this makes sense for us.
We're in our last section, which is like, what is your favorite book? Who would you invite to your dinner party? And who made the biggest impact in your career as a person?
We try to do a lot of dinners with our
Mhm.
entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs will be funded, and even some
Mhm.
of the senior teams. So,
Mhm.
I, for example, have season tickets to the Warriors game. I have season tickets to the 49ers game. And a lot of time, I will invite my entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
CEOs, and, some of their leadership teams to come. Hey, listen, I have tickets available. Would you join me? Right? I love doing that, right?
Mhm.
Because that's one way you build a relationship that even goes far beyond
Mhm.
questioning them on why are you doing this, why are you doing that, why are you spending so much money. That's what I think is very important, right?
Mhm.
Because entrepreneurs need to understand that you are trying to help them. You're not demanding, it's not like, gosh, you gave them money and so now they owe you all kinds of answers and that you're the boss. Well, we're not the boss. Yes, we might be on the board, but they're also on the board. We're collaborating together, working together to make things happen, right? And I think what really counts in all that is it can't be just words. It has to be integrity, right? They got to see that listen, this person really does care, right? They're trying to give me advice, right? A lot of times, we give advice to our entrepreneurs. When we see them doing something or trying to go about doing something in a certain way, we will sit down with them and say, well, listen, I've done this many times before. Yes, you are an expert in this area, but listen, I have funded, 75 plus companies over my 30 years, and I've seen a lot of outcomes, things that go wrong, things that go well. What are the lessons I've learned? Let me try and help you in this situation, give you give you some advice. I think that becomes very important, right? Interacting and also being gentle, right? Not being demanding like I'm the boss, right? Being gentle, helping them. Listen, we're in this together. We're collaborating. If you win, I win. If you lose, I lose, right? So we both win or we both lose. And so we're trying to protect each other and help each other, right? And so those are that's the model, right? That I believe we have to portray to our entrepreneurs, because once they see that, then they're more open to coaching and more open to listening to you. My favorite book is the Bible, and the greatest person that has mentored me is Jesus Christ, right? And that's where I learned integrity is very important when you deal with people. And you can't be, it's not just integrity. You can't be just looking out for your own interest. You have to look after their interest as well. You're in this together, right? Integrity, truth, helping people is very, very important, right? And that is how we have to deal with entrepreneurs and our teams, our companies that we funded, right? Very important that we deal with them, because we're not the boss, right? We are co-workers with them. We are co-laborers with them, right? They win if we win, we win if they win. If we work together, we will win, right? And that's the key thing. And you have to have respect for them, right? They are working long hours. They've taken lots of risks. They've given up stable jobs. They've come into a startup. Their families are at risk. Their kids are at risk. And so, when I look at all of that, I just look at it and say, listen, integrity is important. Faithfulness is important. You have to be patient with them. You got to help them. You got to coach them. You got to interact with them. They might not agree with you all the time, but you still spend time with them and help them understand. And you learn in the process too sometimes, right? Because that's how we learn in our investment schemes as well, and our thesis, because we learn a lot from our entrepreneurs, and they learn a lot from previous investments we made, mistakes, how to avoid mistakes, how to raise money, so on and so forth. So those are some of the key things.
Can you give us an example of like one time that you gave an entrepreneur advice that eventually pay off?
Well, I think this happens all the time. I think the topic that comes up from time to time, right, with entrepreneurs is the following. When you're in the operating seat, which is where our entrepreneurs are, there's always a tendency to get a little optimistic. You have to be optimistic, right, to be an entrepreneur. But there's a tendency then to, I need to hire 2 more salespeople. I need to hire this. I need to hire that. And our job is to sit down with them and examine that and say, okay, that makes sense, but you can't spend all that money right away, right? And so therefore you do it on a milestone basis, right? Okay, let's hire 1 people or 2 people. Let's see how things progress. If things are progressing well, then we can go hire people, because we have to manage our cash. Because we need to manage our cash, because if we run out of cash, you're in trouble, we're in trouble, we'll have to raise money. Someone will come and price this deal from the outside. If we haven't done well, if we burned too much cash, then there'll be dilution to you, there'll be dilution to us. Both of us will have a problem. And, hey, we've done this many, many times before. So here, let's do it on a very gradual basis as you're growing the company. So, those are examples, right, where we share from our previous experience. And then this is where integrity comes in. This is where, we're not trying to take advantage of them. Collaboration comes in. Hey, listen, we're in this together. You win, we win, I lose, you lose. And so how do we do that?
For sure. Yeah, that's a great, like advice that you could give. And thank you so much for coming onto the show. I really appreciate it.
All right.
And
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.